Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lessons from Life. My name is Margaret Ellis. I am 74 years old. I live alone in a small farmhouse just outside Burlington, Vermont. My husband, Richard, passed away 12 years ago. My two children have families of their own now. They call when they can, and they visit whenever life allows. I don't blame them. Still, some days, this old house feels much bigger than it used to. Every morning, I make a cup of tea, sit by my kitchen window, and watch the birds gather outside. That routine had been the same for years. Until one rainy Tuesday, I walked to my mailbox, expecting nothing more than bills and advertisements. Instead, there was a single cream-colored envelope. No return address. Only 3 words. For Margaret Ellis. Something about it felt different. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was one sentence. If you're reading this, I finally found the courage to tell you the truth. My hands began to shake. At the bottom of the page was a name I hadn't seen in more than 50 years. Thomas Carter. For a moment, the world around me disappeared. Thomas wasn't just someone I once knew. He was my first love. We met during our first year of college in 1968. He was funny, kind, and the kind of person who always believed tomorrow would be better than today. We spent hours talking about the future. Sometimes we'd sit beside a quiet lake until sunset. We dreamed about traveling across America, opening a little bookstore, maybe even starting a family one day. Then, everything changed. Thomas enlisted in the military. I still remember the day he left. He promised he'd write every week, and for a while, he did. Then the letters became fewer. Eventually, they stopped. I waited, for months, then years. Finally, I accepted that life had moved on. A few years later, I met Richard. He was a wonderful man. He gave me a beautiful family, and I never regretted the life we built together. But somewhere deep inside, a small part of my heart always wondered what had happened to Thomas. Inside the envelope was another letter. This one was much longer. I took a deep breath and began reading. Thomas explained that after returning home from military service, he tried countless times to find me. But my family had moved. Our old neighborhood had changed. Every search ended with another dead end. He never stopped wondering if I was happy. Then he wrote something that made me stop reading for a moment. Margaret, you changed my life without ever knowing it. I couldn't understand what he meant. As I continued reading, everything became clear. When we were 22 years old, I once told Thomas about my biggest dream. I wanted to open a free library for children whose families couldn't afford books. To me, books weren't just stories. They were hope. They were escape. They were possibilities. I had completely forgotten that conversation, but Thomas never had. Years later, after building a successful business, he quietly began donating money to small towns across America, one library at a time, always anonymously, never asking for recognition, never telling anyone why. Inside the envelope were photographs, dozens of them, children smiling, families reading together, tiny libraries in places I had never even heard of. Every building carried the same small plaque, inspired by a dream shared in 1968. No names, no credit, just those words. I couldn't stop crying. I never imagined something I said as a young woman had inspired so many lives. At the very end of the letter was one final invitation. Thomas wanted to see me, just once. I hesitated. 50 years is a very long time. Would we even recognize each other? A week later, I boarded my first airplane in nearly 30 years. When I arrived, I found him sitting in a wheelchair outside one of the libraries. His hair was completely white, his hands trembled, but his smile, it was exactly the same. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then he laughed softly. I always knew you'd come. I hugged him, and suddenly, it felt like those 50 years had disappeared. We spent the afternoon walking slowly through the library. Children filled every corner, reading, laughing, learning. Thomas looked at them and smiled. You gave me this dream, Margaret. I just helped build it. Part 6, Goodbye. Before I left, Thomas handed me one final envelope. If I don't get another chance, promise you'll open this later. 3 months later, I received the phone call. Thomas had peacefully passed away. At his memorial service, teachers, parents, children Volunteers. Hundreds of people came to say goodbye. Many had never even met him, yet every one of them had been touched by his kindness. That evening, I opened the final envelope. Inside was another handwritten note. Dreams don't belong to the people who imagine them. They belong to the people willing to carry them forward. I read those words again, and again, and again. The following spring, I sold a piece of land behind my house. With the money, I opened a small community reading center. Nothing fancy, just shelves filled with books, comfortable chairs, and a warm place where children could discover stories. Every Saturday afternoon, the room filled with laughter. Parents volunteered. Teenagers helped younger children read. Sometimes, I'd quietly sit in the corner and smile, because every happy face reminded me of Thomas, and of one forgotten dream that refused to disappear. Looking back now, I've learned something important. We often think our words disappear the moment we speak them. But sometimes a simple dream, a kind sentence, or one honest conversation can travel farther than we ever imagine. If you're watching this today, never underestimate the power of your kindness. You may never know whose future you're changing. I almost threw away that letter. If I had, I would never have known that a dream I shared as a young woman had become a legacy, touching thousands of lives. My name is Margaret Ellis, and this is the story of the letter that changed everything. Please like, comment, and subscribe this channel to see more heart-touching story. See you in the next video.